Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'd like to start off by wishing everybody a productive and blessed Ramadan. I know it's going to be different with all the mosques closed and our inability to go there to pray or have large gatherings with our family and loved ones during iftar, but hopefully we'll find a way to revive the Islamic spirit within ourselves and our families. I also wanted to clarify that this series is put together by the efforts of Sister Majda. I'm really only here to translate this for our non-Arabic audience. So with that, let's get started. I think it's important whenever we talk about the meaning of a surah or ayah in the Quran to look at the context in which it was revealed. So there's two really important things I want to emphasize about the people of Quraysh and what was happening when this surah was revealed. The people of Quraysh were a very tribalistic people. So that means that they would stand by their family members, their clan members, their tribe members against the world no matter what. They also really, really loved poetry and language to the point that somebody who was at the bottom of society could raise themselves to high esteem simply by reciting some good poetry to the people. So with those traits, it was expected that when the Quran came, that the people of Quraysh would be the ones to appreciate the beauty in its meaning and structure the most, and that they would be there to support their prophet and protect him against everyone. But that's not really what happened, at least not for a lot of people in Quraysh. What ended up happening is that they turned against the Quran and turned against the prophet. They tried to say that the Quran was just a bunch of made up lies that the Prophet came up with, and they tried to also undermine the character of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Despite the fact that for the last 40 years that he had been living with them, he was known as the honest and trustworthy. People swore by his character, people really loved him. And yet when he came with this message, they all turned against him and started to call him a deceitful magician and tell people to avoid him at all costs. Now, why did they do that? Well, it was really against their business and their interest. You see, the Arabs around them would go to where they were, which was Mecca, and they would do pilgrimage there, where they would worship their own personal idols. So this polytheism and idolatry that existed within the Arab world was really a source of economy for the people of Quraysh. And when they saw the message of Islam start to spread, a message that claimed there was only one God and looked down on the idea of all the other idols and gods that were around at the time, they were scared that they would lose this source of money. And they were scared that they would lose the respect and esteem that they had gained as the caretakers of Mecca. So they really, really put in a lot of effort against Islam, and they harassed the Prophet and his followers both emotionally and physically. And it was a very tough time for the Muslims. And it was around this time that Surah al-Furqan was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And this surah, it really focuses on the fact that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was sent with a message to the whole world, a message that was meant to last till the end of time, and it would be supported by this amazing book, the Quran. So let's look into it a little bit more. The surah is really split into two parts. So one part kind of deals with the mercy of Allah on the Prophet and on his followers, kind of to comfort the Prophet during these difficult times and to comfort his people during these difficult times. And the other part was really meant as a warning to the people who rejected the message. It documented some of their actions in the world and how these would be reflected later in what they see and what they felt on the Day of Judgment. So this surah starts off in a very unique way. Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Blessed is he who sent down the Furqan upon his servant that he may be the world's warner. So the reason why this is a unique start is because of the very first word in Arabic, tabarak. It's different from other words and from other ways that the ayahs in the Quran start, because it's not just a regular verb or noun or conjunction like other ayahs tend to start, but it has kind of a special feature to it. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't really think of a good example in English, so I'm just going to try the best I can to kind of describe the spirit of the word. It is a word like a verb that is meant to be constantly acting and everlasting in nature. So this word particularly is talking about blessing. So the blessing of Allah is constantly acting and everlasting in nature, as seen through the blessings of the Quran and through the message of Islam. This start of the surah kind of reflects the importance of the Quran and the message of Islam on a global scale, just from the very first word that we see here. And this kind of shows us that the Quran has a more important role or a greater impact than some of the materialistic miracles that the other prophets came with. So let me kind of explain that point a little bit more. The people of Quraysh, when the Prophet first came and started talking about Islam and started preaching to them and started reading the Quran to them, they were desperate to find a way to undermine the message. And some of the people in Quraysh, they had interacted with Christian and Jewish scholars, and they had heard about their prophets, and they had heard about the miracles that the prophets had come with. So they asked the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that if he was a prophet like these other prophets, he should prove it by bringing them a miracle like the others have. Now we all know that Allah is very much capable in providing the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ with this materialistic miracle they were asking for. And yet Allah refused their request and did not give them this miracle that they asked for. The reason that Allah refused the request for these miracles is that the miracles of the past prophets came for a very specific purpose. They came to a people who had a different way of thinking than people today. They were primitive in nature and they saw a lot of unknowns around them, and they justified these unknowns through magic and the paranormal. So to kind of connect with them or convince them of the presence of a creator, they needed something that seemed like magic and seemed paranormal. And that's why they got these amazing miracles, like splitting the sea or people coming back from the dead. But the people today, they are different. They believe in science and knowledge and thinking and philosophy. It's a very different climate. And so bringing a miracle to them would not address this way of thinking or this way of reasoning, but what does address it is the Quran. So the Quran addresses this way of reasoning by stimulating the mind to reach the conclusion that there is a creator. It constantly tells us to look at the world around us, look at the history of civilization and contemplate it. And that if we do that with an open mind, searching for the truth, we would reach the conclusion that there is a creator. It really serves as a reminder to the people of what they already know through their fitrah, that there is God. But it also does something else. What we see is that the Quran actually has a greater impact on the people than these materialistic miracles of the past did. And we can kind of see this in the story of Musa alayhi salam and his followers, in contrast to what happened with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his followers. So Musa alayhi salam, we all know, came with some great and amazing miracles. He was able to turn his staff into a snake. He was able to turn his hand white and glowy. We saw what happened to the Pharaoh and his people when they refused to listen to Musa alayhi salam on the request of Allah through the 7 plagues. And then we saw Musa alayhi salam split the sea to help the children of Israel escape the oppression that they were experiencing from the pharaohs in Egypt. And yet, despite all of these things that they were shown, they didn't really accept the message. They followed Musa alayhi salam because he was a powerful man, but they never really internalized his message or accepted it. And this is kind of shown in this verse here that talks about how after they escaped Egypt and after the sea was split in front of them, Musa alayhi salam and his followers were walking and they passed by this village, and in this village they see the people worshipping an idol. And their reaction was to turn to Musa alayhi salam and tell him, "Why don't you make us a god like the one that they have?" And of course Musa's reaction was, "That is something that is extremely ignorant. That just came out of your mouth." And he says this because after everything they've seen and everything they've experienced, it didn't set in that there is only one God, and they were still looking after something materialistic, like an idol. This is again further shown when the people of Israel were shown their promised land. And there lived a civilization that was very powerful, but very tyrannical and oppressive, and the people around them were scared of them. And they were told that this promised land was filled with many, many blessings and everything they've dreamed of, and all they had to do was go fight for it. And Allah promised that they would win this fight. This was their promised land, so they were going to win. They just had to fight for it. And their reaction at the time was, "Oh, Musa, we don't want to go there. We don't want this fight. You and your God can handle it." So they say, "You and your Lord go and fight, and we will sit right here and wait for you." So this was their reaction. These were not a people who had internalized this message or had any dedication to the faith. These were people who were just following somebody they perceived as powerful. They didn't even refer to God as our God. They always said to Musa alayhi salam, "You and your Lord, your Lord, your Lord, your Lord." So this is the attitude that developed after seeing these miracles. When you compare that to the attitude that came out of the followers of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the followers of the Quran, how this Quran actually had an impact on their way of thinking, on their character, and made them better people. We can see this in their reaction during the very first battle in Islam, the Battle of Badr. The Muslims were vastly outnumbered. And the Prophet turned to his people and he asked them if they were willing to fight with him. And this was their response. They said, "Yes, we will not say to you what the children of Israel said to Moses." Right? So this is back to the ayah that we just said. We're not going to tell you, "Go, you and your Lord, and fight. Indeed, we are remaining right here." But instead, what we're going to say is, "Go, you and your Lord, and fight, and we will fight with you." So the Quran really did have this huge impact on these people and the way that they read their faith and on their character. And that's why they were able to establish a strong ummah that not only changed the people within it, but they were able to also guide a lot of other ummahs onto the righteous path. So the Prophet who was chosen for this message, he wasn't just chosen amongst regular people. He was actually chosen from amongst the prophets as well. He was seen as the one who is the most obedient, resilient, and strong in his faith and in his servitude to Allah. And so he was chosen as somebody of great moral character who would actually be able to completely internalize the Quran and practice it in his day-to-day life, from the little things to the big things. The perfect role model for the whole world to see. So what is this message that he came with? Well, this message really comes with a way of life. This way of life, if practiced and followed by the people, will actually hold the key to the happiness of all of humanity. Some of the things that it preached were taking care of each other, helping each other. We see in the first ayah here that it says, "Because of that, we decreed upon the children of Israel that whoever kills a soul, unless for a soul or for corruption done in the land, it is as if he had slain mankind entirely, and whoever saves one, it is as if he had saved mankind entirely." It's a way of life that preaches mercy and kindness unto others. Indeed, Allah orders justice and good conduct and giving to relatives and forbids immorality and bad conduct and oppression. He admonishes you that perhaps you will be reminded. It's a way of life that stands for justice and truth, regardless of whether you are a king or a slave, poor or rich, whether you have to testify against your family member or against a loved one. It doesn't matter. Justice and truth always prevail. And we see this in this last ayah here. "O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm in justice, witnesses for Allah, even if it be against yourselves or parents and relatives. Whether one is rich or poor, Allah is more worthy of both. So follow not personal inclination, lest you not be just. And if you distort your testimony or refuse to give it, then indeed Allah is ever with what you do acquainted." So this is the way of life that we're talking about. And really important in this way of life is the idea of unity amongst all of mankind. So we see this reflected in a lot of verses and hadiths. One verse right here from Surah Al-Hujurat says, "O mankind, indeed we have created you from male and female and made you people and tribes that you may know one another. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. Indeed, Allah is knowing and acquainted." What this is saying is that, we all come from the same place, the same man and woman that started us all. And yes, we are different tribes and different people, but all of this is so that's interesting, right? So that there's something for us to talk about and get to know each other and get to be helpful to each other. That people come with different skills and talents so that we can coexist with each other. And that's it. There's no sense of superiority for any one of these skills or talents or races or genders. All it is just a way of life. And the only thing that makes us different is our relationship with Allah, which is something that none of us could really judge. Only Allah can be the judge of. So it puts us on equal ground and unites us as one people. In the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's final sermon, he says, "O people, your Lord is one, and your father Adam is one. There is no favor of an Arab over a foreigner, nor a foreigner over an Arab, and neither white skin over black skin, nor black skin over white skin, except by righteousness. Have I not delivered the message?" And his people responded, "Yes, you have." So again, this reiterates, there is really nothing that makes one person better than the other or worse than the other. And really, we are one people. Another example of this is another hadith by the Prophet ﷺ, where he was talking not just about how we are equal in nature, but how what affects one person will affect the other. So this comes through in this hadith where he says, "The parable of those who respect the limits of Allah and those who violate them is that of people who board a ship after casting lots, some of them residing in its upper deck and others in its lower deck. When those in the lower deck want water, they pass by the upper deck and say, 'If we tear a hole in the bottom of the ship, we will not harm those above us. If those in the upper deck let them do what they want, they will be destroyed together. If they restrain them, they will be saved together.'" So this message of Islam is really meant to be on a global scale. It should be given to everybody. We can't just isolate ourselves in a little, hole or society and say, we're going to take care of ourselves, we're going to practice, and we're going to leave everybody do whatever they want. Because whatever bad things happen to anyone, anywhere in the world, will feel the effect of that in some way. And there's nothing that shows us this more than the current situation we're going through, the current difficult times we're undergoing with coronavirus. This is such a small, little, tiny virus, not even visible to the naked eye. And yet look what it has done to the whole world. We realize now we're all in the same boat. Doesn't matter how different our geography is. No border or barrier was able to stop this virus from becoming a pandemic and being in every corner of it. And it doesn't matter if you're rich and poor. Everybody's hit by this virus in the same way, and everybody's affected by it. We see developing countries struggle with it, and we see developed countries struggle with it. And no military power in the world, no amount of money was able to stand up against this virus we were all touched by and hit by in one way. So to recap everything that we've talked about today, Surah al-Furqan, by the way, is a different word for the word Quran, so they have kind of the same meaning. It's here as a global message, one that is meant to spread to the world, and it carries within it a way of life that is meant to make functional societies, happy societies. And we know that it will spread. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Allah drew the ends of the world near one another for my sake, and have seen its eastern and western ends, and the dominion of my ummah would reach those ends which have been drawn near me." On a final note, I just wanted to kind of mention the caliber of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. See, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was honored by being referred to as the servant of Allah. It is a part of our belief that being the servant of Allah is the highest position that you can get. And we see this by the Prophet not just being referred to as a servant of Allah, but by being referred to as a servant of Allah in very important situations. So we see here during the trip of Isra and Mi'raj, Allah says, "Exalted is he who took his servant by night from al-Masjid al-Haram to al-Masjid al-Aqsa." We see it repeated again when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is in a state of worship, and that when the servant of Allah stood up supplicating to him. And we see it again when Allah is talking about revelation, and he says, "Praise is to Allah who has sent down upon his servant the book and has not made therein any deviance." So this is really the highest form of praise that you can give anyone, including the Prophet. It's important for us to know this so that we do not exaggerate in the praise of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is something that he himself says in the hadith: "Do not exaggerate in praising me as the Christians praise the son of Mary, for I am only a servant, so call me the servant of Allah and his apostle." And this is a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari. So basically what he's saying is that, sometimes when we try to show our admiration or respect for somebody, we blow things out of proportion. Like what happens with Isa alayhi salam, with Jesus, who eventually made his way to being God himself. We need to be careful as to how we refer to the Prophet and recognize the value in him being called the servant of Allah as being the highest level of honor. And this was decided by Allah himself. And we can also see another example of this: when the Prophet was given a choice to be a prophetic king or a prophetic servant, he chose to be a prophetic servant. So this is the final point that I wanted to make today. So with that, we kind of conclude this part of the series. Thank you for tuning in. Jazakumullahu khairan, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.